The forest swallowed Harper Thornwood's desperate footsteps, each stride sending jolts of pain through her exhausted body. Blood dripped from the gash on her arm where Beta Marcus's claws had torn through flesh, the copper scent trailing behind her like a beacon for anyone following. 3 months pregnant, packless, and running through territory that belonged to no one, she had become exactly what her former alpha had called her: rogue trash. The memory of those words still burned, even now, even as branches whipped across her face and roots threatened to send her sprawling. She pressed her uninjured hand against the small swell of her belly, feeling the flutter of life within, the only thing keeping her moving when every muscle screamed for rest. Keep going. For the baby, keep going. Her wolf, dormant since Cade's death 2 moons ago, offered nothing. No guidance, no surge of primal strength. Just hollow silence where her mate bond had once thrummed with warmth. The hunters had taken Cade from her, and something essential had fractured inside Harper that night. She'd watched him fall, watched the silver bullets tear through him as he shielded her body with his own, and the scream that ripped from her throat had echoed through mountains. Now she ran through those same mountains alone. The gash on her arm throbbed with her heartbeat, deep enough that she could see the white gleam of bone beneath torn muscle. Beta Marcus had grabbed her when she'd tried to slip away from the pack gathering, his claws extending as his grip tightened. "You're not going anywhere," he'd snarled, breath hot against her ear. "Not until you tell us who fathered that abomination in your belly." She'd never told them about Cade, never revealed that her secret mate had been a rogue, a wolf without pack or territory who had stumbled into her life like a miracle and left it like a tragedy. If they knew, if Alpha Drayson knew, they would have killed the baby before it drew its first breath. Rogues were considered less than nothing in the Silver Ridge pack. Their offspring were considered dangerous, contaminated. So Harper had kept her silence through weeks of interrogation, through Alpha Drayson's cold fury and the whispered accusations of the pack members who had once called her friend. She'd endured the isolation, the reduction of her food rations, the guards posted outside her small cabin. But tonight, when Marcus had dragged her before the pack elders with blood streaming down her arm and threatened to cut the child from her womb if she didn't speak, something inside Harper had shattered, not broken. Shattered into something sharp and desperate and suddenly, terrifyingly free. She'd driven her knee into Marcus's groin, twisted from his grip as he doubled over, and run. The forest had welcomed her with open shadows while the shouts of pursuit rang out behind her. Now those shouts had faded, replaced by the sounds of night creatures and her own ragged breathing. But Harper knew better than to slow down. The pack would track her by morning. Her blood trail would lead them straight to her. Think. Think. Cade taught you how to survive. Water. She needed water to mask her scent, to clean the wound before infection set in. The distant sound of a stream pulled her northeast, away from Silver Ridge territory and deeper into the unclaimed lands that bordered the Alpha King's domain. No wolf in their right mind entered the Alpha King's territory uninvited. Jace Blackwood was legend given flesh, the youngest king to ever unite the mountain packs, a warrior whose wolf was said to be larger than any in living memory. His justice was swift, his mercy selective. But Harper wasn't in her right mind. She was pregnant, bleeding, and absolutely certain that Marcus would kill her baby if he found her again. The stream appeared through the trees like salvation, moonlight dancing across its surface. Harper half stumbled, half fell down the bank, gasping as the cold water hit her wounded arm. The pain was clarifying, sharp enough to cut through the fog of exhaustion that threatened to drag her under. She tore a strip from her already ruined dress and wrapped it around the gash, pulling tight with her teeth. The makeshift bandage bloomed crimson immediately, but at least the pressure would slow the bleeding. Rest. Just for a moment. Just. The snap of a branch brought her head up, instinct screaming danger even as her depleted body refused to move. 4 figures emerged from the tree line upstream, their forms silhouetted against the pale moonlight. Not Silver Ridge wolves. Their scent was wrong. Sour, unwashed, carrying the tang of old violence. Rogues. The largest one smiled, and Harper's blood turned to ice. Well, well. His voice was rough gravel, carrying easily across the water. What do we have here? A pregnant little Omega, bleeding all over the stream? Harper forced herself to stand, legs trembling beneath her. I don't want any trouble. Course you don't, sweetheart. He stepped into the water and his companions fanned out behind him, cutting off her escape routes with practiced ease. But trouble seems to have found you anyway. He inhaled deeply, his eyes narrowing with sudden interest. That's interesting. That's very interesting indeed. What? One of the others demanded. Her blood, it's... He laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the trees. Boys, we just hit the jackpot. She's Thornwood bloodline. You can smell it. That sweetness underneath. Healers. Every last one of them. Harper's heart stuttered. Her grandmother had been the last true healer in her family, dead before Harper was born. She'd always assumed the gift had died with her. And pregnant too. The rogue leader's smile widened into something predatory. Xavier's gonna pay a fortune for this one. Chain her up. We're moving camp tonight. Harper opened her mouth to scream, but a hand clamped over her face while rough arms pinned her own behind her back. The world spun as they dragged her from the stream, her heels leaving furrows in the muddy bank. The last thing she saw before consciousness faded was the moon overhead, full and golden, the harvest moon that had witnessed her baby's conception. The same moon that had hung above her and Cade on their final night together. Please, she thought, though she didn't know who she was begging. Please let someone find me. The cage was barely large enough for a wolf to turn around in, and Harper wasn't in her wolf form. She huddled against the cold metal bars, knees drawn up as far as her pregnant belly would allow, listening to the rogues argue around their fire. I'm telling you, the prophecy's real. The leader, she'd learned his name was Drake, gestured emphatically with a half-eaten rabbit leg. The elders have been talking about it for generations. A child conceived under a harvest moon will bring a new era. Xavier's been searching for years. And you think this is it? Skepticism dripped from the question. She's a healer bloodline. She's pregnant. The timing's right. Drake's eyes slid toward Harper's cage and she fought not to shrink back. Even if the prophecy's nonsense, Xavier will want her. Her blood alone is worth more than anything we've taken in years. Harper's hand crept to her belly, where the baby had grown quiet, as if it was hiding from the danger, just as she wished she could. Xavier. She'd heard that name whispered in Silver Ridge, always with fear. A rogue king who'd carved out territory through bloodshed and dark experiments, twisting wolves into something unnatural with his alchemical obsessions. I have to get out. I have to... But her body was finished. The blood loss, the exhaustion, the stress of the past weeks. It had all culminated in a bone-deep weariness that even terror couldn't overcome. Her eyelids drooped, and Harper hated herself for the weakness even as darkness pulled her under. She dreamed of golden eyes watching her through flames, and a voice like thunder promising, I'm coming. When she woke, the sky was gray with approaching dawn, and the rogues were scrambling. Patrol sighted. Move! 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 Drake yanked open her cage and dragged her out by her injured arm, tearing a scream from her throat. She stumbled, barely staying upright as he shoved her in front of him. Then she felt it. A presence crashing through the forest like a tidal wave, power so immense it made the air vibrate. Her wolf, silent for months, suddenly pressed against her consciousness with a whine of terrified recognition. Alpha, her wolf breathed, Alpha King. And then he emerged from the trees, and Harper forgot how to breathe. He was enormous, That was Harper's first coherent thought as the Alpha King stepped into the clearing, his presence filling the space like a storm contained in flesh. His wolf was there, visible just beneath the surface of his human form, in the predatory grace of his movement, in the barely leashed violence that rolled off him in waves that made even the air feel heavy. Drake's grip on her arm tightened painfully. "Don't come any closer, Blackwood. I'll slit her throat before you take another step." The knife appeared against Harper's neck, cold steel pressing into the vulnerable flesh just below her jaw. She should have been terrified. She was terrified. But beneath that terror, something else stirred. Something that had been dormant since the night Cade died. Her wolf lifted its head. Alpha King Jace Blackwood didn't stop walking. His eyes swept the clearing once, cataloging threats with the efficiency of a born predator, and then they landed on her. The impact was physical. Harper felt it slam into her chest like a fist, heat flooding through her veins in a rush so sudden and complete that her knees nearly buckled. Her wolf surged forward with a keening cry she felt in her bones, pressing against her consciousness with desperate recognition. Him. It's him. Mate. Alpha. Ours. Impossible. It was impossible. Her mate bond had shattered when Cade died. She'd felt it break, felt the severed ends curl up inside her like dying things. There was nothing left to bind, nothing left to recognize. But the heat kept spreading, molten gold pouring through her veins. And when Jace's stride faltered, when his chest heaved with a sharp, startled inhale, and his eyes blazed from storm gray to burning amber, Harper understood that impossible meant nothing to fate. Mine. The word ripped from him like it had been torn from somewhere primal, somewhere beyond conscious thought. His voice was thunder and earthquake, shaking through her bones until she trembled with it. The rogues scattered. 3 of them broke and ran into the forest, abandoning their leader without a backward glance. Drake cursed viciously, yanking Harper tighter against him, the knife pressing harder against her throat. She felt skin part, felt warm blood trickle down toward her collarbone. Jace moved. Harper had never seen anything like it. Speed that defied his massive frame, power that made the ground shake beneath his footsteps. He cut through the remaining rogues like they were made of paper, claws extending from human hands without the blur of a full shift, each strike precise and devastating. Then his hand closed around Drake's wrist, and Harper felt the rogue's bones shatter. The knife clattered to the ground. Drake screamed, high and thin, but Jace wasn't looking at him. Those blazing amber eyes were fixed on Harper's face, drinking her in like a man dying of thirst who'd just found water. "You're hurt," he said, and beneath the growl was something else, something that made Harper's wolf whine with a longing she didn't understand. Her hand flew to her belly as realization crashed over her. The bond wasn't just recognizing him as her mate. Her wolf was pressing forward with absolute certainty, with bone-deep knowledge that transcended logic. The baby. The harvest moon. The prophecy Drake had whispered about around the fire. A child conceived under a harvest moon will bring a new era. The bond recognized Jace not just as her fated mate, but as her child's rightful father in the eyes of fate itself. "That's not possible," she whispered. Her voice came out broken, raw. Jace released Drake's shattered wrist, letting the rogue crumple to the ground. His warriors emerged from the trees, securing the camp with brutal efficiency, but he didn't acknowledge them. He had eyes only for her. "What's your name?" His voice had softened, though it still vibrated with barely contained power. He stood close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell pine and wood smoke, and something underneath that made her wolf want to press against him and never let go. "Harper." She swayed on her feet, the blood loss and exhaustion finally catching up to her. "Harper Thornwood." Harper. The way he said it, like a prayer, like a promise, like something sacred. undid something behind her ribs. His hands came up, hovering inches from her shoulders, and she saw the tremor in them. The Alpha King, trembling for her. "I'm going to catch you now," he said quietly, "because you're about to fall." She wanted to argue. The denial was right there on her tongue, sharp with years of self-reliance and the hard-won independence of a woman who had learned never to depend on anyone. Then the world tilted sideways, and Jace's arms were around her, and Harper Thornwood knew nothing more. She woke to warmth and softness and the overwhelming scent of pine. For a moment, Harper simply lay still, letting her senses catalog her surroundings while her mind struggled to catch up. She was lying on something soft. Furs, she realized, thick and luxurious beneath her cheek. A fire crackled somewhere nearby, casting dancing shadows across the walls of what appeared to be a tent. A large tent, the kind reserved for commanders on campaign. The kind reserved for kings. Harper sat up too quickly, and the world spun. A hand caught her shoulder, steadying her. "Easy." Jace's voice came from beside her, and she turned to find him sitting cross-legged on the ground next to the pile of furs. Not on them. Beside them, maintaining a careful distance even as his hand kept her from toppling over. "You've lost a lot of blood." She looked down at her arm and found clean bandages wrapped around the wound. The torn fabric of her dress had been replaced with a soft tunic that hung to her thighs, large enough that it had to be his, over clean leggings that someone had carefully pulled on her unconscious body. "Who changed me?" The question came out sharper than she intended. "My healer, Elena. Female." He withdrew his hand slowly, as if reluctant to break contact. "I stayed outside the tent." Harper studied him in the firelight, trying to reconcile this man with the legends she'd heard about the Alpha King. Up close, he was younger than she'd expected, perhaps a handful of years older than her own 23. His dark hair fell in waves that softened the hard planes of his face, and there were shadows beneath those storm-gray eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. His eyes were gray again, she noticed. Human, not the blazing amber of his wolf. He was holding himself in check, maintaining careful control of the beast that had roared mine in a clearing full of rogues. "Your arm needs stitches," he said. "Elena can do them, but she wanted to wait until you woke. Some wolves." He paused, and something dark flickered across his expression. "Some wolves panic if they wake up restrained, even by medical procedures." "You mean some abused wolves?" The words hung between them. Jace's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away from her gaze. "Yes," he said simply. "I mean wolves who have learned to fear." Harper wrapped her arms around herself, very aware of the baby resting safe beneath her heart. "Why am I here?" "You're in my camp. My patrol found the rogues this morning." He shifted slightly, and she caught the way his hands clenched against his thighs. "You're safe now." Safe. The word tasted strange on her tongue. Foreign. "I don't even know what that means anymore." Something in his expression softened, and for a moment he looked almost sad. "I know." She didn't ask how he knew. The mate bond pulsed between them, that thread of heat and recognition that made her wolf whine with longing. Through it she could feel echoes of his emotions, carefully shielded but present. He knew about fear, about running, about the particular loneliness of being surrounded by people who couldn't truly see you. "May I clean your smaller wounds?" He gestured toward her face, where branches must have left scratches during her desperate flight. "I have salve that will prevent scarring." It was phrased as a question, a request. The Alpha King, a male who could command armies with a word, who had just killed 3 rogues without breaking a sweat, was asking her permission to help her. Harper nodded, not trusting her voice. Jace rose smoothly and retrieved a small pot from near the fire, along with a clean cloth dampened with water. When he returned to her side, he settled back on the ground rather than sitting on the furs with her, maintaining that careful distance. "Tell me if I hurt you," he said. "I'll stop immediately." The first touch of the cloth against her cheek made her flinch, not from pain, but from the sheer, unexpected gentleness of it. Jace froze, his hand hovering in the air between them. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean—" "Never apologize for that." His voice was low, fierce. "Never apologize for protecting yourself." He waited, cloth raised, letting her decide. When she nodded again, he continued with even more care than before, dabbing at each scratch with movements so light they barely registered. Harper found herself watching his face as he worked. The furrow of concentration between his brows, the way his lips pressed together when he encountered a deeper cut, the visible effort it took for him to maintain his gentle touch when she could sense through the bond how much his wolf wanted to pull her close and never let go. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because you're hurt." "That's not what I mean." She caught his wrist, stilling his movement. The contact sent sparks dancing up her arm, but she forced herself to focus. "You're the Alpha King. You have healers, servants, an army of wolves who would do anything you commanded. Why are you personally cleaning the face of a pregnant packless Omega?" Jace set down the cloth. When he looked at her, his eyes had darkened, gray deepening toward the thundercloud color she'd seen in the clearing. "Do you know what the bond is?" he asked quietly. "What it truly means?" "It means fate has decided we belong together." Harper couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. Fate decided that once before. It didn't end well. She saw the understanding flash across his face, followed by a pain that mirrored her own. "Your first mate. Cade." Saying his name hurt even now. "He died 2 moons ago. Hunters. Silver bullets." She pulled her hand away from Jace's wrist, wrapping her arms around herself again. "The bond shattered when he died. I felt it. There shouldn't be anything left to connect to anyone." Jace was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "Second chance bonds are rare, one in perhaps 10,000 wolves." He paused, and she felt something complicated pulse through the connection between them. "I've never heard of one occurring with a pregnant female. The bond shouldn't recognize a male who isn't the biological father." "But it does." Harper placed her hand on her belly. "It recognizes you. I don't understand why, but—" "The prophecy." She looked up sharply. "You know about that." "Everyone knows about it. A child conceived under a harvest moon will bring a new era." Jace's expression had gone distant, thoughtful. "The elders have been debating its meaning for generations. Most assumed it would be a child born within one of the established packs, fathered by an alpha of pure bloodline. Instead, it's a child with a rogue father and a packless mother. And a second-chance bond to the Alpha King?" He met her eyes, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "The bond doesn't make mistakes, Harper. If it recognizes me as connected to your child, there's a reason." She didn't know what to say to that. The night felt suddenly too large, too full of possibilities she wasn't ready to examine. "You should rest," Jace said finally. "We'll talk more in the morning." He rose and moved toward the tent entrance. Harper watched him settle onto a bedroll laid out across the threshold, far from the pile of furs where she lay, positioned so that he would wake if anyone tried to enter. "You're sleeping there?" "Yes." "But this is your tent." "It is." He adjusted his position, leaning back against the tent pole. "Which means I decide who sleeps where. You're injured, pregnant, and exhausted. You get the bed. And the Alpha King sleeps on the ground." Something that might have been a smile flickered across his face. "The Alpha King has slept in far worse places, I assure you." Harper lay back down slowly, pulling the furs up to her chin. Through the bond, she could feel his wolf pacing, wanting to be closer, wanting to protect in the most primal way possible. But Jace held himself in check, giving her space she hadn't asked for because he understood that she needed it. "This is how it should have been," her wolf murmured. "Safe. Protected. Alpha." Harper closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under, comforted despite everything by the solid presence of the Alpha King guarding her sleep. The council tent was larger than any pack hall Harper had ever seen, and filled with wolves who radiated power and disapproval in equal measure. She stood before them in borrowed clothes that marked her as under the king's protection, her back straight despite the trembling in her legs. Jace sat at the head of the gathering, his expression carved from stone. He'd warned her about this meeting during their quiet breakfast. The council would demand answers, he'd said. They would push back against his decision to bring her into the camp. He'd asked her to trust him. Harper wasn't sure she remembered how to trust anyone, but she'd agreed to face them anyway. Running would only make things worse. "So let me understand this," Elder Corwin said, his lip curling as he surveyed her. "You expect us to believe that the Alpha King has formed a second-chance bond with a pregnant Packless Omega of dubious origin? This isn't how bonds work." And yet. Jace's voice was mild, but Harper felt the undercurrent of warning. "Here we are." "She could be a plant," another council member suggested. "The rogues could have placed her there deliberately, knowing your patrol routes. It wouldn't be the first time an enemy tried to use a female to get close to you." Harper's hands curled into fists at her sides. "I was in a cage. They were going to sell me to Xavier Silvermane for his experiments. Does that sound like a plant to you?" "What it sounds like," Elder Corwin replied coldly, "is a story designed to invoke sympathy. We have only your word for any of it." He turned to address the gathered wolves, his voice carrying through the tent. "I move that we confine this woman until her story can be verified. She is rogue-touched, carrying an unknown wolf's child, and her presence here poses a security risk to every wolf in this camp." "Rogue-touched trash," someone muttered from the back of the gathering. The words hit Harper like a blow. She'd heard them before, the same phrase Alpha Drayson had used when he'd stripped her of pack standing, when he'd declared her unworthy of the protection she'd known since birth. She opened her mouth to respond, to defend herself as she'd learned to do in Silver Ridge, but before she could speak, power crashed through the tent like a physical force. Harper staggered, barely keeping her feet as the wolves around her dropped to their knees. The pressure was immense, suffocating, a reminder that the male sitting at the head of the gathering wasn't just an alpha. He was the Alpha King, and his wolf was very, very displeased. Jace rose from his seat. His eyes had shifted to molten amber, his wolf surging so close to the surface that his human form seemed to blur at the edges. When he spoke, his voice resonated with harmonics that vibrated in Harper's chest. "Who said that?" Silence. Even Elder Corwin had fallen to his knees, his earlier arrogance replaced by pale-faced terror. "Who said that?" A younger wolf near the back of the gathering pressed himself flat against the ground, trembling. I'm sorry, Alpha, I didn't mean—" Jace moved through the crowd like a predator, wolves scrambling to clear his path. He stopped in front of the cowering male and stood over him with deadly stillness. "This woman is under my protection," he said, and each word fell like a death sentence. "She carries a child blessed by the harvest moon. The bond recognizes her as mine, and that makes her your future Luna, your future queen." He let that sink in for a long moment. "Speak of her that way again, and you will answer to my wolf." The younger wolf whimpered an acknowledgement. Jace turned back to the council, and though he didn't release his power, he allowed it to ease enough that the wolves could rise from their knees. "Harper Thornwood will remain in my camp as an honored guest," he announced. "She will receive whatever care she requires. She will be treated with the respect due to my mate." His gaze swept the gathering, landing on each council member in turn. "Is that understood?" A chorus of "Yes, Alpha" rippled through the tent. "Good. This meeting is over. The council filed out in subdued silence, giving Harper a wide berth. Only when the tent had emptied did Jace's power finally recede, leaving the air feeling strangely light in its absence. Harper found herself staring at him, her heart pounding against her ribs. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "I've been called worse." "That doesn't make it acceptable." He moved toward her slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wanted. When she held her ground, something warm flickered in his eyes. "You are not rogue trash. You are not worthless. You are a survivor who escaped an impossible situation, and anyone who fails to see that isn't worth your attention." The conviction in his voice made something shift inside her, a loosening behind her ribs, a softening of walls she'd built so carefully over the past months. This male, this king, had just forced his entire council to their knees in defense of her honor. Not because the bond demanded it, not because she carried a prophesied child, because someone had been cruel to her, and he wouldn't allow it. "Thank you," Harper whispered. Jace's hand came up, hovering near her cheek without touching. "You don't have to thank me for basic decency." His voice had gone rough again, his wolf pressing close. "But you're welcome." She didn't pull away. For the first time since Cade's death, Harper let herself lean toward another wolf's warmth. Harper didn't know how long they stood there, her body swaying toward his warmth like a flower seeking sunlight. The tent felt smaller now, intimate in a way that made her pulse quicken. Jace's hand still hovered near her cheek, and she could feel the heat radiating from his skin, could smell pine and wood smoke wrapping around her like a promise. "You should rest," he said finally, his voice still carrying that rough edge. "Elena said your wound needs time to heal properly." Harper nodded, but her feet didn't move. Something kept her anchored there, some invisible thread that pulled taut whenever she tried to step away from him. Her wolf, that dormant creature she'd thought dead alongside Cade, stirred again, pressing against her consciousness with an urgency she didn't understand. "Where will I sleep?" she asked. Jace gestured toward the back of the tent, where thick furs had been arranged into a sleeping pallet. "There, I'll take the ground by the entrance." "That's your bed. And you're my guest." His lips curved slightly. "My injured, pregnant guest who has been through more in the past day than most wolves endure in a lifetime. I think I can survive a night on the ground." Before Harper could argue, a commotion outside drew both their attention. Raised voices, the sound of running feet, and then a young wolf burst through the tent flap, his face ashen. "Alpha, we've intercepted a messenger at the northern border. He carries word from Xavier Silvermane." Harper's blood turned to ice. The name hit her like a physical blow, and she stumbled backward, her hand flying to her belly. Jace caught her elbow, steadying her, his eyes narrowing at her reaction. "Xavier Silvermane," he repeated slowly. "The rogue king who conducts experiments on wolves?" The messenger nodded, clutching a scroll in trembling hands. "He demands an audience, Alpha. He says—" The young wolf's gaze flickered to Harper and he swallowed hard. "He says you have something that belongs to him." Jace's growl vibrated through the tent, low and deadly. "She belongs to no one but herself." "I know, Alpha. But his message—" The messenger held out the scroll, his arm shaking. "You need to read it." Harper watched as Jace took the scroll, breaking the black wax seal with a sharp crack. His face remained impassive as he read, but she felt the change in him, felt his power coiling tighter with each passing second, felt the air grow heavy with restrained violence. When he finished, he didn't speak. He simply handed the scroll to Harper. She read it with numb fingers. "Alpha King Blackwood, I understand you've acquired something precious that was meant for me. The pregnant healer with Thornwood blood. She was purchased through proper channels before your patrol interfered with my associates. I am a reasonable male, so I will offer you this courtesy. Return her to me within 3 days, and I will overlook this insult. If you refuse, know that I have already begun preparing measures that will make refusal costly. The border packs have been experiencing strange sicknesses, haven't they? Wolves turning feral, losing their minds? I assure you, this is only the beginning. The child she carries was conceived under the harvest moon. The prophecy speaks of a new era, and I intend to be the one who ushers it in. The healer's bloodline combined with the prophesied child will give me power beyond anything the old kingdoms have seen. You have 3 days. Xavier Silvermane, King of the Unclaimed. Harper's hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the scroll. He ordered the attack, she whispered. The hunters who killed Cade. He sent them. Jace went very still. What? The memories crashed through her, sharp and brutal. Cade's body between her and the silver bullets, the scent of his blood mixing with gunpowder. His last words gasped against her ear. Run. Don't let them take you. Cade wasn't killed by random hunters. Harper's voice came out hollow. Xavier's been hunting me for months. He wanted my bloodline, wanted to breed healing into his pack through... She couldn't finish. The bile rising in her throat made speech impossible. Jace's hands cupped her face with startling gentleness, tilting her head up until their eyes met. His irises had shifted again, amber bleeding through the gray, his wolf so close to the surface she could almost see it looking back at her. Listen to me, he said, each word precise and weighted. Xavier Silvermane will never touch you. He will never touch your child. I don't care what prophecy he thinks he's fulfilling. The only era he's going to usher in is the era of his own death. The conviction in his voice made something crack inside her chest. Not breaking, cracking open, like ice finally giving way to spring. For 2 moons, she'd been running alone, fighting alone, grieving alone. And now this male, this king she'd known for less than a day, was ready to go to war for her. He's poisoning your packs, she said. The sickness he mentioned will be dealt with. Jace released her face but didn't step back. We've been trying to find the source for weeks. Now we know. His jaw tightened. He made a mistake, putting his threats in writing. He's given me cause to move against him openly. He has an army of feral wolves. That's what he meant. He's turning them, making them mindless. They'll follow whatever commands he gives because they won't have the capacity to resist. Jace's expression darkened. How do you know this? Drake. Harper spat the name like poison. The rogue who captured me. He talked while I was in the cage, bragging about Xavier's plans. He said the feral army would sweep through the mountain packs like a plague, and anyone who survived would kneel to Xavier as the new Alpha King. A muscle jumped in Jace's jaw. Then we have 3 days to prepare. Or you could give me to him. The words hung in the air between them. Harper hadn't meant to say them, but some desperate part of her, the part that had spent months running, months being hunted, couldn't help speaking the practical truth. If she left, Jace's kingdom would be safe. His packs wouldn't be destroyed. Wolves wouldn't die because of her. Jace's reaction was immediate and visceral. He stepped closer, crowding her space, his power washing over her in a wave that made her wolf whine with something that wasn't quite fear. Never, he said, and the word resonated with harmonics that made her bones vibrate. Say that again. If I go, you will never go to him. Jace's hands found her shoulders, gripping firmly but not painfully. Do you understand me, Harper? I don't care if he threatens my kingdom. I don't care if he brings 10,000 feral wolves to my doorstep. You are mine, and I protect what is mine with everything I am. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. After everything she'd endured, the control, the captivity, the endless running, any male claiming ownership should have sent her fleeing into the night. But his possession didn't feel like a cage. It felt like shelter. You barely know me, she whispered. I know enough. His grip softened, thumbs tracing small circles on her shoulders. I know you survived things that would have broken most wolves. I know you protected your child against impossible odds. I know you carry healing in your blood and steel in your spine. His voice dropped lower. And I know the bond chose you for me, which means fate itself declared you worthy of a king. Harper's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. The bond chose wrong before. With Cade. The bond chose a wolf who loved you enough to die for you. That wasn't wrong. Jace's expression gentled. But second chance bonds don't happen by accident. They're not a consolation prize, Harper. They're a gift. A recognition that you have more love to give, more life to live. She wanted to believe him. Goddess. She wanted to believe him so badly it ached. How do you know? She asked. How can you be so certain? Jace's smile was small but genuine. Because my wolf has never been wrong about anything that matters. And from the moment I saw you, he's been howling that you're the one we've been waiting for. The tears finally escaped, tracking hot lines down her cheeks. Jace caught them with his thumbs, wiping them away with a tenderness that made her chest ache. Rest tonight, he said softly. Tomorrow we begin preparing for war. But tonight you're safe. I swear it on my crown, my wolf, and whatever is left of my soul. You are safe with me. He released her slowly, as if it pained him to break contact. Harper watched him move toward the tent entrance, watched him lower himself onto a pile of furs that looked far less comfortable than the bed he'd given her. Jace. He looked up, and the hope in his eyes made her breath catch. Thank you, she said, for everything. Sleep, little healer. His voice was rough again. I'll be right here. Harper crossed to the bed on unsteady legs. The furs were soft against her skin, still carrying traces of his scent, pine and wood smoke and something wilder beneath. She curled onto her side, one hand resting on the swell of her belly, and let exhaustion finally claim her. Her last conscious thought was of Jace's eyes, burning amber in the dim light, watching over her like a guardian carved from stone. She slept without nightmares for the first time in 2 moons. Harper woke to the gray light of pre-dawn and the sound of quiet movement. She kept her breathing steady, her eyes barely cracked, watching through her lashes as Jace moved through the tent with the silent grace of a predator. He'd changed clothes at some point. His shirt was different, darker, and he'd added leather bracers to his forearms. War preparations, she realized. He was getting ready for battle. But he paused beside her bed, and his expression shifted into something softer, something vulnerable. In sleep, Harper had turned onto her back, and the blanket had slipped to reveal the curve of her belly beneath the thin fabric of her borrowed shift. Jace's hand reached out, hesitated, then very gently came to rest on the swell where her child grew. I will protect you both, he murmured, so quiet she barely heard him. With everything I have, everything I am. Harper's wolf stirred at the contact, pressing forward with a sound that was almost a purr. She felt warmth spread through her veins, felt the bond between them pulse with something that tasted like promise. Jace's hand lingered for a long moment. Then he pulled back, composed himself, and slipped out of the tent without a backward glance. Harper lay still in the aftermath, her palm pressed to the spot where his hand had rested. Her child kicked once, twice, as if responding to the lingering warmth. I know, she whispered to the life growing inside her. I feel it too. Whatever came next, Xavier's threats, the feral army, the war that loomed on the horizon, she wasn't facing it alone anymore. For the first time since Cade's death, Harper let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could survive this. Maybe she could even be happy. The thought was terrifying. It was also wonderful. The 3 days passed in a blur of preparations and stolen moments. Harper found herself drawn into the rhythm of Jace's war council, her knowledge of Xavier's tactics proving valuable despite the suspicious glances from some of the older wolves. Elena kept her close, monitoring the baby's health while teaching her about the Blackwood Pack's history and customs. But it was the nights that Harper treasured most, the quiet hours when Jace would return to their tent exhausted from training his warriors, only to sit beside her bed and talk, until sleep claimed them both. He told her about his childhood, about the father who had died too young, and the mother who had raised him to be both warrior and king. She told him about Cade, about the love that had bloomed in secret and died in violence, and he listened without jealousy, honoring her grief as part of her story. The bond between them deepened with each passing hour, humming beneath her skin like a second heartbeat. Harper's wolf, dormant for so long, grew stronger in Jace's presence, pressing forward with increasing urgency whenever he was near. On the morning of the third day, the scouts returned with grim news. Xavier's army was moving. Harper stood at the edge of the war camp, watching Jace organize his forces with the precision of a wolf who had been born to command. The feral army was larger than they'd feared. 300 wolves driven mad by Xavier's poison, their minds stripped of everything but the compulsion to obey. Behind them marched Xavier's loyal rogues, perhaps 100 more, armed and eager for bloodshed. "Stay with Elena," Jace said, appearing at her side. His armor gleamed in the morning light, leather and steel designed to protect, while allowing his wolf room to emerge. "Promise me." Harper wanted to argue, but the baby kicked sharply, reminding her of the stakes. "I promise." Jace's hand found her belly, palm warm through the fabric of her dress. "When this is over," he said, voice rough, "we're going to have a very long conversation about our future." Is that a threat or a promise? His smile was fierce and tender all at once. Both. Then he was gone, shifting mid-stride into a wolf that dwarfed every other beast on the field. His fur was black as midnight, shot through with silver at the tips, and when he howled, the sound shook the very air. The battle began. Harper watched from the healer's tent as the two forces collided, violence erupting across the valley in a storm of fur and fang. Jace cut through the feral wolves like a blade through water, but there were so many of them. Too many. For every wolf his warriors brought down, 3 more took its place. And then she felt it. A pull in her blood, a resonance that vibrated through her bones. The feral wolves weren't just poisoned. They were connected, bound together by whatever dark alchemy Xavier had worked upon them. She could sense the corruption like oil floating on water, could feel it pulsing through their twisted minds. Her grandmother's gift. The healing that had skipped a generation, awakening now when she needed it most. "Harper, what are you doing?" Elena grabbed her arm as she moved toward the tent entrance. "You promised—" "I know how to stop them." Harper's voice came out strange, layered with harmonics that made Elena's eyes widen. "I can feel the poison, Elena. I can feel what he did to them." "You're pregnant. You can't—" "If I don't, everyone dies." Harper gripped the healer's hands. "Take care of my baby if I don't come back. Promise me." Elena's face crumpled, but she nodded. "Go. Go. And come back to us." Harper ran. The battlefield was chaos, blood and mud and the screams of dying wolves. She dodged between combatants, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe, until she reached the center of the feral army. The corrupted wolves turned toward her as one, their eyes empty of everything but hunger. She dropped to her knees and pressed her palms flat against the earth. The power surged through her like lightning, white-hot and overwhelming. She could feel every poisoned wolf on the field, could sense the dark threads Xavier had woven through their minds. And she understood, with a clarity that transcended thought, that she could unravel those threads. But it would cost her. Harper thought of Cade, who had given his life to protect her. She thought of her baby, who deserved a world free of Xavier's corruption. She thought of Jace, whose love had cracked open something she'd thought dead inside her. Then she made her choice. She pulled. The pain was indescribable, a tearing sensation that felt like being turned inside out. Harper screamed as the poison flowed into her, drawn from 300 wolves like venom from a wound. It burned through her veins, black and viscous, and for a terrible moment she thought it would consume her entirely. But her grandmother's blood ran true. The healing gift transformed the corruption, purified it, expelled it into the earth where it could do no harm. Harper sobbed as the last of the poison left her body, as the feral wolves collapsed around her only to rise moments later, clear-eyed and confused. What? One of them shook his head, looking around in horror. What happened to us? You're free, Harper whispered. You're free now. The former feral wolves turned on Xavier's rogues with the fury of wolves who had been enslaved against their will. The tide of battle shifted instantly, Xavier's forces suddenly outnumbered and overwhelmed. Harper tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The effort had drained her completely, and dark spots danced at the edges of her vision. Well, well. The voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The healer shows her true colors at last. Xavier Silvermane emerged from the smoke of battle, his eyes gleaming with a madness that made Harper's skin crawl. He was smaller than she'd expected, lean and wiry, with silver-streaked hair and a smile that belonged on a predator. Blood splattered his fine clothes, though none of it appeared to be his own. Do you have any idea how long I've been searching for you? He advanced on her slowly, savoring her helplessness. A true Thornwood healer, the last of your bloodline, and pregnant with a Harvest Moon child, no less. His smile widened. Fate has been very generous to me. Harper tried to summon her power again, but there was nothing left. She'd poured everything into freeing the feral wolves, and now she could barely keep her eyes open. Stay away from her. The words came out barely louder than a whisper. Xavier laughed. Or what? You'll bleed on me? He drew a curved blade from his belt, its edge gleaming with something that made Harper's wolf snarl weakly. Silver. The child will be mine, one way or another. If you cooperate, I might let you survive the birth. If not... He shrugged. There are other ways to obtain what I need. Harper forced herself to her hands and knees, every movement agony. She thought of her baby, thought of the life growing inside her, and felt a surge of desperate determination. I am not prey, she said. Xavier's smile flickered. What? Harper reached deep, deeper than she'd ever gone before, and found a reserve of power she hadn't known existed. It wasn't much, a candle flame compared to the bonfire she'd summoned earlier, but it was enough. She lunged forward and pressed her palm against Xavier's chest. The reversal took everything she had left. Instead of pulling corruption out, she pushed it in, showing Xavier every wolf he'd poisoned, making him feel what they had felt. The madness, the loss of self, the horror of being trapped in their own minds while their bodies obeyed another's commands. Xavier screamed. It was a sound of pure anguish, of a mind breaking under the weight of the suffering it had caused. He staggered backward, clawing at his own face, the blade falling from nerveless fingers. What? What did you... His eyes were wild, rolling like a panicked horse. Get it out! Get it out of me! A massive black wolf materialized from the chaos, shifting mid-leap into Jace's armored form. He landed between Harper and Xavier, his claws extended, his eyes burning with lethal amber fire. For my kingdom, Jace snarled, and his claws tore through Xavier's throat. Blood sprayed across the muddy ground. Xavier made a gurgling sound, hands clutching uselessly at the wound, and crumpled. For my mate, Jace finished, watching until the light faded from Xavier's eyes. Then he turned to Harper, and all the warrior's fury melted into desperate concern. He caught her as she collapsed, cradling her against his chest with shaking hands. "You wonderful, reckless, impossible woman." He breathed into her hair. "What were you thinking?" "Had to save them." Harper's voice was barely audible. "Had to save you. I'm the one who's supposed to protect you." But his arms tightened around her, and she felt the bond between them pulse with relief so profound it made her eyes sting with tears. "Don't you ever scare me like that again." "Can't promise," she murmured against his neck. "Turns out I'm very brave." His laugh was wet, choked with emotion. "Yes. Yes, you are." The battle ended shortly after. Without Xavier's commands driving them, the remaining rogues either surrendered or fled. The wolves Harper had freed stood bewildered among the bodies, slowly remembering who they had been before the poison took hold. Elena reached them as Jace carried Harper back to camp, the older healer's face pale with worry. But Harper smiled at her, one hand resting on her belly where the baby kicked with reassuring vigor. "We're okay," Harper said. "Both of us." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "You impossible girl. You beautiful, impossible girl." That night, under the harvest moon, Jace brought Harper to a clearing overlooking the valley. The aftermath of battle had been cleared away, and the silver light transformed the landscape into something magical, a world washed clean of violence and fear. "I should wait," Jace said, his voice rough. His hands trembled slightly where they cupped her face. "You've been through so much. You deserve time to heal, to choose, to—" Harper silenced him with a finger to his lips. "I've spent 2 moons running, grieving, surviving. I don't want to wait anymore." She rose on her toes, bringing her mouth close to his. "I want to live. I want to love. I want you." The sound Jace made was somewhere between a groan and a growl. "Harper, mark me." The words came out steady, certain. "Make me yours." His eyes blazed amber, his wolf surging so close to the surface that his features seemed to shift and ripple. "You understand what you're asking? A marking can't be undone. You'll be bound to me, to my pack, forever." "I know." Harper tilted her head, baring the junction of her neck and shoulder in ancient invitation. "I choose this. I choose you." Jace's control shattered. He pulled her against him, one arm banding around her waist while the other tangled in her hair. His mouth found the curve of her throat, tongue tracing the spot where he would claim her, and Harper shivered with anticipation. "Mine," he growled against her skin, and then his teeth descended. The bite was pain first, sharp and bright, piercing through nerve and muscle with primal intensity. Harper cried out, her fingers digging into Jace's shoulders hard enough to bruise, but the pain transformed almost immediately, blooming into a pleasure so intense it stole her breath. Through the newly forming bond she felt Jace, truly felt him, his fierce protectiveness wrapped around her like armor, his wonder at having found her, at being chosen by her, rang through their connection like bells. And beneath it all, vast and deep as the ocean, his love for her and for the child she carried. Tears streamed down Harper's face as the marking completed, as his essence twined with hers in bonds that transcended flesh. She had thought she knew what the mate bond felt like from her time with Cade, but this was something more. Something that felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. Jace pulled back, his lips stained with her blood, his expression a mixture of savage satisfaction and profound tenderness. "My mate," he breathed, "my Luna, my heart." Harper didn't give him time to say more. She rose up, feeling her own fangs descend, sharper than she'd expected, guided by instinct she hadn't known she possessed, and bit down on the junction of his neck and shoulder. He shuddered beneath her, a groan tearing from his chest as her teeth broke skin. Through their bond, she felt his shock transform into elation, felt the marking seal on his end as thoroughly as it had on hers. Yours, she whispered against his throat, tasting the wild copper of his blood. Always yours. Yours, he echoed, his voice wrecked with emotion. Only ever yours. They stood wrapped in each other beneath the harvest moon, their bond settling into place like sunlight finding a window. Warm, eternal, unshakable. Harper could feel Jace in her mind, a constant presence that would never leave her alone again. And she knew he could feel her just as clearly. Her love, her gratitude, her absolute certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. The council might object, Jace murmured eventually, though he made no move to release her. A Packless Omega as their Luna Queen. Let them object. Harper smiled against his chest. I just saved their kingdom. They can deal with me ruling it. His laugh rumbled through them both. There's my fierce little healer. The formal ceremony took place 3 days later in the great hall of Jace's stronghold. Harper stood beside her mate, wearing a gown of midnight blue that flowed around her pregnant belly, Jace's mark visible on her throat for all to see. Elder Corwin, the same wolf who had called her rogue-touched trash, was the first to kneel. Luna Queen, he said, and though his voice was stiff, the words held genuine respect. Forgive my earlier words. I did not understand who you were. Rise, Harper said, and found her voice carried the same harmonics of power she'd heard in Jace's. I don't require forgiveness for honest doubt, but I will require loyalty going forward. You have it. Corwin rose and stepped back, and one by one, the rest of the packs followed. Hundreds of wolves kneeling to acknowledge her as their queen, their Luna, their healer. Elena caught her eye from the crowd and smiled, tears streaming down her weathered face. Harper smiled back. That night, alone in their chambers, Jace pulled Harper onto the balcony overlooking the moonlit mountains. His palm rested on her belly, where their daughter, for the healers had finally confirmed the baby's sex, kicked with enthusiasm. The prophecy, Jace said quietly. A child conceived under a harvest moon will bring a new era. Do you believe it? Harper considered the question. She thought about the feral wolves she'd freed, now integrated into the packs and slowly healing. She thought about the border territories, peaceful for the first time in years. She thought about the changes already rippling through the mountain packs, new alliances, new hope, new possibilities. I believe our daughter will be extraordinary, she said finally. But the new era? She turned in his arms, looping her hands behind his neck. I think we already started that ourselves. Jace's smile was brighter than the harvest moon overhead, the same moon that had witnessed her daughter's conception, the same moon that now blessed her marking and her marriage. I love you, he said, and the bond between them sang with the truth of it. My impossible, brave, miraculous mate. Harper rose on her toes and kissed him softly. I love you too, my king, my heart, my home. Somewhere in the distance a wolf howled in celebration, and others joined until the night rang with their song. A new era had begun, not with war, not with prophecy, but with a family finally whole.